4 years, 22 countries, and countless adventures at sea. And now, as many of you already know, I'm almost 6 months pregnant. Life on the water has taken on a whole new meaning, and I thought it was finally time to answer some of the big questions you've been asking about what it's really like to be pregnant while living on a boat. Right now, we're anchored in one of the most breathtaking places in the world, Princess Louisa Inlet. We sailed here last week. And are now surrounded by mountains, waterfalls, and nothing but nature. Just us, our floating home, a 40-foot sailing boat named Tay-Lee, and this incredible off-grid life. So come aboard, join us for the journey from here south to the city of Vancouver. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe, because there's so much more to share. This morning, it is Sunday morning, and we are going on a hike. Now, there's not too many hikes around here. There's one up to an old trapper's cabin, but the trapper's cabin isn't still there, so we're still umming and ahhing whether we're going to do that, because it's a pretty hard hike. But there's one up here. There's actually an easy trail at the bottom, and then you can hike up to, I think it's called One-Eyed Falls. So we're going to try and find One-Eyed Falls today, and looking forward to it. We're in a really cool position, and as you remember yesterday, Zach actually had to dive down a little bit to put the stern line through the ring on the rock.
The ring is there.
So we've definitely woken up to a little bit of a different view this morning. Also because yesterday when we came in it was bright sunshine, not a cloud in the sky. Now we've got this really lovely atmospheric low-lying clouds, which is very traditional in these kind of landscapes. On my computer a long time ago, I had the Yosemite wallpaper, and it reminds me just of that, looking around and seeing all the steep cliff edges and the pine trees and the clouds. So it's really special and it feels really cool to be here.
We didn't realise this, but we're actually at the end of the national park here, and there's a big kind of camp at the end by Malibu Rapids, and it looks like it's owned by the same place. So yeah, we can't do the waterfalls today, which is sad, but
that was the only route to the waterfall.
It's on all trails as well. It doesn't say anything about not being able to go that way, but that's fine. We're going to go and do Mings trail instead. Left.
Moss, nature's carpet. Hanging from the trees you can see this moss. I'm pretty sure my friend Hayley said it was called old man's beard here. It's actually an air plant, so it can just hang anywhere and get all the nutrients and things it needs to survive from the air. It's really cool though. It makes it look really almost haunted, the forests here.
I just worried Becca a little bit by saying I could see a bear, but it's just there.
The head of a bear?
Yeah.
Oh, it's just a fake sculpture.
Yeah. Who put that up there?
That's so funny.
That's so funny.
Look how many there are. That was awesome.
That was a really amazing morning. This place is perfect.
at that. That's exactly what you want.
Whoa. That looks amazing. That's your best one yet.
This chopping board always makes me laugh. Because can you tell, in Mexico we didn't have a long enough ruler for a boat chop. So we used the chopping board with a Sharpie, but that's okay. Taste test.
Yeah? Tastes like sourdough?
Mmm!
There's a big rain cloud just moving through the valley at the moment. It's just going to clip us. Looks incredible. It smells beautiful out here.
You're getting wet, Teak. Oh dear. Oh dear. It's raining. Teak, you're in the one space that's getting wet. Isn't that so surreal? That's the closest cloud I've ever been to. That didn't make any sense. The water is there. Cloud.
How's that happened? I'm really confused.
I think it's lost. Wow. Swimming in Princess Louisa Falls feels pretty cool. Oh, the water's seeping into my wetsuit now. What it is it's warm and oh, that scared me. Nice one. It's warm underneath, but then the top layer is fresh water,
It's
which
like
is
the top foot.
yeah, it's glacier runoff.
I don't want to swim normally. It's way warmer swimming upright.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool.
We would have to pry ourselves away from this place, but with good wind forecast, it was time to depart. But not without letting Tay-Lee see Chatterbox Falls up close first.
Early morning start.
Maybe we're going to let these two other sailboats go first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We have just about left Malibu Rapids, but there's tons of boats coming out with us.
Shows you picked a good time.
Yeah, really good time. I think there's one coming in as well.
One right on our tail. Look at that. nice. We're just wing on wing. We have about 15 knots of wind behind us and we have a bit of current, so we're sitting at kind of 6.1 knots, so really lovely, and we're hoping this wind stays. There's actually nothing better than just waking up with the sun and sailing. It's like it almost seems like there can't be anything wrong in the world when you just do that. So yeah, there's some snow on the mountains over there and it's a great day. It's a great day to be alive.
We are flying along, the wind's pretty much at 180 at the moment. What are those sails doing? Eh? Yeah, sails.
We were actually departing on the last day of a gale warning in the Strait of Georgia, and despite the wind now being lower, seas were about to show the remnants of the higher winds that passed through just the night before. Oh, the seas are becoming pretty big actually.
You do have a sailboat and you can have the wind on sail.
Haven't had seas like this in a little while.
Yeah, it's a bit sporty. It's one less known from a gale, isn't it?
Mhm. What can you see?
A tiny, like 20-30 foot sailboat going upwind. They should really have a sail up because it would really help with them, but it's a rough day for them going up in this. It'd feel like 30, not 7 points.
Yeah. That is tough. They've got places to be.
Yeah, clearly.
Despite mushy conditions, it wasn't long before the water changed colour and we knew we were nearing the city.
We actually had come to Vancouver for Becca's 20-week scan, so we thought it was a pretty good time now to answer some questions about her pregnancy so far.
There's a few things I wanted to chat about because it's a bit of a foreign topic being pregnant on a sailing boat when you live on a sailing boat full time. And I have a very small bump, but I'm 22 weeks pregnant today actually, which is exciting. And firstly, I just want to say that if you hear any kind of snoring sounds, it's not Zach in the other room. Teak, our cat, is behind the camera asleep and he is quite the snorer. So if you hear any sounds, that's why. I have some notes on my phone because there's a few points I want to touch on, but I thought I'd start at health and safety kind of stuff. So the first question kind of is surrounding how safe it is to be pregnant on a boat. And this is a great question for us. It feels as safe, if not safer than a house, because it's what we're used to. I think that's the key thing. So our mobility on the boat is very good because we're very used to it rocking and rolling and moving and the motion of the boat. I think if you were new to sailing or a boat, there might be more of a falling hazard if, yeah, you aren't used to it. But for me, I'm very used to being on the boat, and bar 1 month, I've spent this whole pregnancy, so almost 6 months pregnant on the boat. For trimester specific risks, for all trimesters I didn't want to be offshore. Zach and I sat down very early on and kind of chatted about it, and whilst it was probably going to be fine for me to be offshore, probably, the risk of if something happened, it just wasn't worth it for us. I think people forget that we can sail any time. You know, we've spent the last 4 years sailing, and there's many more offshore trips that I will do at some point. It just wasn't worth the risk for me or the baby to be hundreds of miles or even thousands of miles from land. And on that, I think if you are offshore and you have a medical emergency of any kind, including a pregnancy complication, the EPIRB is obviously your best friend, and that's a device that triangulates your location and your issue to boats and planes and helicopters, and the army, the navy, everyone will get the message that you are in distress. So ships with doctors on can divert course, and planes can, you know, divert course, and helicopters. I never want to be a liability to anyone. I think personally doing the most responsible thing for me would have been to not put myself in a position where I needed to be rescued. And obviously when I'm pregnant, the chances of you needing medical intervention are naturally higher, just because you are pregnant. It was my first pregnancy, so I didn't know how it's going to go. So that's kind of the answer to that. But as you all know, for the trip from Mexico to Canada, for that 1 month, I flew to Canada with Teak, and I have no regrets about doing that, because for me and the baby and Zach and the crew, it was just the absolute best decision. The next question is about how far we are from a doctor or a midwife or an OBGYN, and I don't have an OBGYN. I have been picking them up along the way, and I'm going to touch more on this in a bit. But I have been pretty far from them on some remote islands, as you've seen, not even day sail away. However, I will say that even in remote places, people live and function and work, and they have medical emergencies. So there's always a way. There's seaplanes and there's faster boats, and there are ways to get places. And so it wasn't even a consideration in my mind to be worried about that. I think worrying in itself can do more harm than good, as I've found from worrying previously about things. The chances are it will never happen, so worrying makes you suffer twice. So I was pretty adamant for the health of me and the baby that I wasn't going to spend my time worrying about the distance to a hospital. People have had babies in remote places for years and years, and I had to reassure myself that my body knew what it was doing, and should I need medical help, I would find a way. You know, on boats you become very resourceful, you chat to a lot of people and you will just find a way, because the boating community gets together, and yeah, if someone needed help, you would help them, and I'd hope that if I was in the same situation, I could find some help too. On that as well, we obviously have a very extensive first aid kit on the boat, and I wouldn't take any medication without a doctor's go ahead, but there's plenty of online services for doctors, so you can contact doctors online. Obviously it's a paid fee, but that's absolutely fine. When I got to Canada, actually, I did find a midwife, and I only needed one appointment, which was my 12-week scan, but I had to pay for the whole first trimester of care for that one appointment, which was fine. It's just how they do it. And because of that, I actually did have a midwife's direct number. So she said, if you have any questions or concerns, call me. I didn't end up doing that, but that was also reassuring that if I was concerned about anything, to ring. The biggest section is healthcare abroad. Can I attend doctor's appointments and scans while travelling? And I will say, of course you can, and I have. It's definitely more difficult and obviously more expensive than your home country, obviously depending on where you live. The tricky thing is basically getting the appointments. So it took us quite a long time to figure out the Canadian healthcare system, and once we figured it out, we managed to be able to ring certain people and book in appointments, but it was really tough to figure out where we were going to be. Obviously, depending on the weather, we're not always in the same place at the same time, or schedules and sailing don't usually go together, so that was the hardest bit. As for the money, I'd say each appointment was between £200 to £500, so not cheap by any means, but I will say the care I've had has been phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal, especially the appointment I just had, which was my 22-week scan here in Vancouver, was the best experience I've ever had with any ultrasound ever. It was wonderful, and it was just a clinic we found on Google. We did have to get a referral from another midwife, and actually we got a referral from a midwife up in Powell River because we were initially there before the gale came in, and then we had to leave and come down here, and they were very kind and sent over my referral to this ultrasound clinic here. You have to advocate for yourself, you have to be very organised, and you have to do all the legwork, which the doctors in, well, at the UK at least, you know, you go to the doctor and they would book you your scan and you just get a letter in the post or a text saying when it would be. It's definitely not like that. You have to go to a place and you have to be aware of how long it's taking, because it's quite, because you're not a local resident, all the appointments and paperwork, it's quite easy for your application to get lost in that. So I had to kind of advocate for myself and make sure that things were being passed on to the correct people, and I would have to often pass things on. Going back to Mexico, I will say that because we had the first appointment in Mexico, that was tough. It was mainly tough because we couldn't speak Spanish, and we are absolutely trying still to learn Spanish, but until you're somewhat conversational, it was hard being in a town. We were in La Paz, which has some tourists, but cities like Puerto Vallarta or Cabo have a lot more English speakers because there's a lot more English speaking tourists. That would be a really big decision if we were back in Mexico and also pregnant and needing to get care. I know Puerto Vallarta, when I had my knee MRI, it was phenomenal care, it was really inexpensive, and there was English speaking doctors, and it made life very easy for us. In La Paz, I had to find a doctor who was, how do I explain? The doctor I went to was a little bit older fashioned in his ways, and he wasn't necessarily willing to test me or to do the checks that I would want if I was in Canada or the UK, and I had to really push for certain things, and it was expensive because they aren't used to having these requests. Even then I had a blood sample sent off and I wanted a quantitative answer, so how much is in my blood, and instead I got a qualitative, so just a yes or a no. And because I was doing the research online by myself, I knew what I needed to look for, and the doctor was just there to send off the test. He wasn't there to analyse the tests. I had to do that, and so I did really have to advocate and be kind of my own doctor, and that was a bit tricky. But I think, yeah, Cabo and Puerto Vallarta, Mexico City, places like that where there's a lot more tourism, I think it would have been a lot easier actually. So that was just our experience in Mexico. The final section is just about comfort and practicality while living on a boat. It was interesting because whilst I wasn't horrendously sick in my first trimester, I definitely didn't feel great. I was nauseous and I was exhausted, and I had quite a few food aversions, and the nausea is like seasickness. However, with seasickness, you're sick and then you feel better, but I was just nauseous all the time. So that was tough. And there was definitely some days when we were sailing where I was kind of leant over the side, not feeling great. And Zach was a legend, bless him. But for that, I definitely felt they have these things here, which I haven't seen in the UK, but maybe they exist other places. It's called gravel. They're ginger tablets. And I did experiment with buying raw ginger and ginger candies and things and eating those, but the last thing I wanted to do was eat this really pungent thing. So these little tablets I could have, which were just 100% ginger, that really helped. Also just getting enough sleep helped because I was exhausted. And then the other thing is just fresh air. If I felt rough, I'd just come up and get some fresh air, and always keeping sure my stomach was full, or at least not empty. That was my biggest thing. The minute my stomach got a little bit empty, I felt horrendous. And I think it works for seasickness too. I think if you keep a little bit of something in your stomach, then you don't get quite as seasick. We've only been seasick a handful of times, but that's how we have felt. And just touching on seasickness quickly, we're really lucky that it hasn't been a big thing for us throughout our travels. We have been seasick each a handful of times in some rough weather. It's mainly coming down below when it's dark, you're rolling around, especially if you've been motoring and you can smell diesel. It's like, oh, your brain needs to see the horizon to see which way's up, and you're just being slung around. It's not great. But my biggest advice for anyone watching this who does get seasick is just to take some tablets. if you know you're going to get seasick, there's nothing to prove by just fighting through it, aside from the fact that you'll just be not as good a crew member in that moment. We know cruisers who have sailed 2 laps of the world and they take seasickness tablets every time they go because they know they are prone to it, and there's no shame in that. And that's actually some advice we got really early on, is if you get seasick or you feel sick, just take the tablets. Find some that work, that don't make you drowsy, and just take them because you'll feel so much better. So yeah, if you're watching this and you're needing that little sign, here it is. I think I've touched on most stuff there. At least it's just my experience. I'm not speaking for anyone else, but hopefully that answers some of the kind of questions you had. And if you've got any more, just drop them down below. I love chatting about it and, you know, putting people's minds at ease, including our family who are probably watching this and thinking we're nuts for being pregnant on a boat.
Thanks for joining us through the sailing, the adventure, and now the pregnancy. Next week is a tearjerker, as it's our final week aboard Tay-Lee. See you then.
It is our final sail on board Tay-Lee. Oh, I'm sad. Thanks for keeping us safe, Tay-Lee.